All right, it is time for a weekly wrap-up and film goals check-in. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm super excited to be here today and to share with you this video. In this video, I am going to share how my first week of watching went with my new set of film goals. So each quarter or season, I'm picking different film categories or genres to work on. And so for this season, the third season or summer or quarter three, depending on how you look at it, for this season, what I'm working on are, what am I working on? Music films, films that were nominated or won the Taurus Stunt Award, and also I'm continuing Fight the FOMO. It was a category I brought in last season, and it's about watching anything that just catches my eye, anything that looks new and interesting or has newly become available, or even if I've never heard of it, but I'm excited about it and I'm curious about it and I want to watch it now. Don't wait, watch it now, and so that's what I'm doing. So let's start with that. Let's start with my Fight the FOMO pick. This one I really knew I wanted to watch, and I think it was one of the reasons why I kept the Fight the FOMO, because I realized if I picked a different category, I wouldn't get around to seeing this, or at least not right away, and that is Sous la Seine, or Under Paris. For some reason, both of the posters I found, I think, are both in French. Yeah. Sous la Seine. Oh, that one does not come in as clear, but it gives you a clearer picture of what it is. So it's called Under Paris. So we have Paris over here. And what is this? What is this? It's a shark movie. Yeah, it's a shark movie. So this is about sharks in the Seine. So the river that flows through Paris. So this is, I think it's a Netflix original. I watched on Netflix. It says Netflix here. Seulement sur Netflix cet été. So I believe that's only on Netflix this summer, I believe. Yeah, so this is a French film, and it is about sharks in the Seine River. And I was really excited about it. I love shark movies. I almost picked shark movies as one of my categories, but I switched it to monster movies just to be a bit more... I've seen a lot of shark movies too, so anyway, but new shark movie is always going to be a yes for me. And then I think, do I have some other pictures? One of the, I don't know if this is going to work to share some of the IMDb things. Let me know if you like it, because it sort of scrolls and I don't have as much control and I don't want any spoilers, but it might give some variety. So anyway, so Under Paris, this is a new release on Netflix, and it follows the story of sharks in the Seine River, but we also follow a story of, wow, usually it changes the photo. Maybe the plan did not work so much. Anyway, so it follows, yeah, and we're following, oops, I gotta... adjusting here. Oh, why is it doing that? Okay. Anyway, so we're following, so it has a sort of disaster movie setup. We have, it's an unbelievable premise, so people aren't going to believe it's true. However, of course, there's scientists and activists that are involved in the learning about whether it's actually happening, and both of them have their own backstories, and that's actually the scientist and the activist, and then the marine law enforcement, I don't know what the right term would be, get involved as well. So you have multiple different parties trying to look into this potential disaster. Is it true? Is it not true? And we know it's true, but, and then it culminates, and excitement and all of those things. So overall, I would say for me, I actually quite enjoyed with this one, the characters and the story of this one. I like the backstory of some of the characters. I thought there was some good acting and some good connections. I did like how much they built up the tension around it, and I felt like there was at least one very good panic scene, which I think you kind of are maybe looking for with a shark movie. Like, you're gonna have to have that sort of panic moment, and I thought it did quite well. I'm actually finding the scrolling pictures a little distracting, so I'm gonna go back to the poster. So anyway, so I thought the panic scene was good, and that was something that I learned thinking about the film in general, that's something that I think is an element of shark movies or monster movies that we're looking for, that sort of chaos. I guess especially if there's some kind of crowd situation. If it's a limited cast, maybe not so much. On the on the flip side, some of the things that I thought were not as strong, I felt like it had a couple of threads that dropped in terms of the story, and I wasn't sure how I felt about the climate change environmentalist element to it. Like, I thought it was a good addition, and it is of course timely, but I kind of felt like it was it was one of the threads that kind of got dropped, and it felt a bit more like, I wouldn't say it's a message movie, and it's a bit more of a plot point, and I felt it could have been a little more fleshed out, and some of the characters there, I would have liked to know their motivations a little bit more, but I thought it was an interesting element to bring. I mean, not that, nature, a monster like films, I guess it's not actually, I know now we would say climate change, but having someone who's like an environmentalist or a naturalist or, a biologist, bringing that perspective, you're almost always going to have that perspective. And maybe not almost always, but you're often going to have that perspective. So I don't know why it felt new. Maybe it just feels timely. Maybe that's what's going on. Anyway, so that was, so I thought a couple of story threads might have got dropped there. And I will have to say, and I don't know whether to mention this or not, but in this sense, it did impact my overall enjoyment, and that was that I felt like the ending was a little, I wish it was either more clear or more vague. I wasn't quite thrilled with where it landed. It was impactful, but I just kind of felt like I wanted to know more or less. So I wanted it to either be more clear or more vague. So I was a little surprised at that. I almost went back and rewatched it, but the last time I did that with another film, I'm like, nope, that was how I remembered it. So I think I'm not going to do that. Unless I hear the contrary opinion, I don't feel like it's worth my time to do that. But I did overall, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. I liked the shark stuff. I thought that I had some really great scenes. They had some interesting takes. There were a couple of things that are a bit like, how can this really be a surprise, but you're surprised? But that's also the sort of like, I watch a lot of shark movies, so it's going to take a lot to surprise me. But there were some things that were unexpected, and I did think I did like the effects. That's not something I talk about too much, but I thought it was impressive in terms of the shark stuff and the underwater stuff and the location stuff. And I imagine it was on location. It is a little weird with the timing given the upcoming Olympics. And I did think it sort of played on that because it did have a sort of sporting event element. So I'm a little surprised at that, and I don't know how it will do because the Olympics are just, they're 2 weeks away, I think, at this point. I'm really looking forward to them. I love the Olympics. So overall, I know that I'm always going to watch a shark movie. This one played out a little too much in the middle for me, but because I also really enjoyed the characters and then the story, and then the shark stuff was not, it was impressive and I liked it, but what drew me in a little bit more was the characters and the story, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just, I'm a little surprised about that. And I think the shark stuff was it was over the top, and I think that you do want that. I don't know. I want that in a bit of a shark movie, but then I think that because the seriousness of the characters, it didn't quite match what I'm used to. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just wasn't quite what I expected. One of the things I didn't know going into this is that it was directed by Xavier Gens, who directed The Divide, as well as Frontiers, which I haven't seen. The Divide I saw at Toronto After Dark many moons ago at this point, the Toronto After Dark Film Festival, and that was incredible. It was very tense. Oh my gosh, that movie was so tense. So I didn't know that I knew the director's work from other works, so that was interesting. Sometimes you find out that after the fact. So overall, this was a little disappointing. I felt like it sort of, I'm used to it by movies like this being more extreme or more serious, and it was somewhere in the middle. And I think I like it on the two edges a little bit more than in the middle. So, but I did really like the characters, and I really felt for the characters. So that's always a good sign. So there we have that. Next up, more French movies. I watched for and this one I actually got a second film, an additional film in this week, because I have sort of a 2-for-1, because one of the categories I am watching films for is things that were nominated or won the Taurus Stunt Awards, and I was very surprised at how many of the titles are extremely long. And especially when I was looking up some of the music films as well, again, extremely long. So I was trying to find something a little on the shorter side, and I realized I found a film, but it was the second in a series. And after having not so much success in series that I talked about in my wrap-up last week, which was very long, and I apologize for that. I really think it's the longest video I've done. But anyway, so what I decided to do is I decided to watch both films in the series, and it's the second one that's nominated for the Taurus Stunt Awards. So I decided to watch Lost Bullet, or Balle perdue, and Lost Bullet 2. So these are French action movies, crime, action. I wouldn't go as far as to say crime thriller, but action crime, I think, would be a good way to go. So we start, in this series, we follow Lino, who is a mechanic, and after being something going wrong, he ends up getting a second chance by a police officer named Charest, who is leading a team against some drug dealers, but they need some oomph to the cars. So they're looking for a mechanic to help them get an edge on the being able to keep up with and outrun the enemies, basically. So Lino's given a second chance, and to work on this team. I quite enjoyed this, and it's interesting because I didn't know anything about this. I think the second one I had heard of because I was looking through the Taurus Stunt Awards, and I watched these both on Netflix. I think they're Netflix original. It says Netflix on it. I don't know if that doesn't necessarily mean it's a Netflix original. So I'm going to talk about them individually. It's the second one that's nominated for the award. So with Lost Bullet 1, I actually quite enjoyed it. It is on the edge of gritty in terms of crime action film, just a little on the edge or over the edge for what I normally would watch now, not historically, but now. But I thought it was a good story. I like the emotional threads of the character. That seems to be a theme going on. And I really liked the guy who plays Charest, Ramsey Bedia, who plays Charest, who's sort of a mentor, the squad leader. I thought he was great. I really liked the character stories. I thought the tension was really good. And man, one of the things I absolutely loved about this was the scrappy fight scenes. My goodness. And I'm trying to remember how many there are, or if there was just one that just really, I just was gobsmacked. It also made me realize how much of the martial arts movies, maybe the ones that I've been watching this year in particular, are historical and wushu, and so they're very highly they're very sort of graceful and stuff, and how that there can be many different styles to fight scenes. And this one, it was just scrappy as all get out. It was just, so that scene, that one particular fight scene, I was just floored by. And it was actually quite long too, so that was very impressive. On the downside to this one, I did figure out the story pretty quickly. I did sort of pick up on sort of choices and stuff like that. At this point though, I feel I've watched a lot of movies, so I don't always consider that necessarily a negative, and they don't hold you at bay on that for too long. But I knew right away, not right away, but I was there were a couple interactions, and I'm we're going with that. But anyway, some people don't care about knowing if you know the whole story ahead of time. Everyone's different. So so that was something that was a little I figured out pretty quickly. I also really wish that some of the women characters had more to work with. From the poster, one of the posters on Netflix, you'd think that Julia, who's here, you'd think that she was the main character, or a dual protagonist, because of how much she's featured in the poster. But it goes quite a while into the film where she's in a scene where she has lines. She has a fair amount of scenes that start off where she doesn't even have lines, and that just feels a bit strange. I really liked her character, but I felt I wish that she had more to work with. Also, the violence on this one is pretty brutal. There's very much that's sort of the edge of the grittiness that I'm not so much someone that's going to watch that as much anymore. But I did think, and like in terms of there's the fight scene, which I really liked, but some of the other like violence throughout like had that sort of like coldness to it, and it was to show character temperament, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to see it. So anyway, overall, I did enjoy it. I actually think it might be it's in contention for my favorite of the bunch, and so it was really great to just like take a chance on something that I didn't really know much about and dive in. And it was also French, and so both of this was French, Under Paris was French, and Lost Bullet 2 was French, so I watched 3 French films in 1 week, and that was awesome. It was one of the things I was missing from last season. Almost everything I watched was North American or in English, so I really wanted to watch more internationally, and so it really delivered on that. And then, so, of course, I continued thing up with Lost Bullet 2. That poster doesn't come out super well, so maybe we'll go with this one. So this was the one that was nominated for a Tour Stunt Award, so for the 2023 awards, it was nominated for vehicle work, and it was nominated alongside Enola Holmes 2, Day Shift, The Gray Man, and the winner that year was The Batman. So Lost Bullet 2 continues the story from the first film, so I can't say too much about it, but we are still following Lino, who's very now focused on sort of what happened in the first film and adjusting to that, and is having some trouble like readjusting his focus after the events of the first film. And with this one, I feel like I liked there was more suspense in the plot for this one for me. It wasn't clear to me who you could trust or what was going on or what would happen, and I thought that gave some really good tension. I also did think it had more really scrappy fighting, so it sort of built on that from the first one, although this one there was more of an air of not like of again like that sort of coldness to it, sort of all around, not just for some people, but for everyone. So that was a little uncomfortable for me. That's something that I don't like, that sort of coldness, like not caring that that's a person. Like there's difference between a fight scene, like fight scenes have lots of different kinds of energies and lots of different intents and are depicting lots of different things for different reasons. But these ones, like the brutality of them was high. Even if the situation was very tense, it was always high. So that was a little tougher for me. And I will say, without question, although I am not someone who watches a lot of films for car chases or car scenes or car stunts, the scene that was nominated for the vehicle work for the stunt awards was spectacular. Like, and I could, like, one of the things I like about this awards is I don't look up what scene it is, because they're nominated usually for scenes depending on the award. So I don't look them up, and I try and see if I can pick it out. I could pick it out. I am not an expert, but it was very easy to pick out. That's the scene, that's the stunt, that's what was nominated, and it was pretty spectacular, although it did sort of build on a theme from the first film. So I'm a little surprised at that, but it really was spectacular. Like, I was just like, you genuinely have not seen that before, and that's always like kind of cool in its own right. So on the other side of things, I did feel like I was a bit on the fence, because I do feel like it took some of the elements from the first film and just like cranked them up to 11, and that's pretty, I guess, normal for a sequel, but I do feel like, I don't know, like sometimes I like it when films do something new. I will say, though, that the plot, it did add a lot of new elements in terms of the plot and the character and the story, and as I said before, I felt like there was more suspense in this one on who you could trust. The first one, it was very clear, sort of like what the through line of the plot and the character motivations were, and this time it's, with some characters, it's a bit more blurry. So I actually think that's a pro, but I will say again, in the realm of the women characters that are in this, I didn't like what they did with this one, because they did sort of have this sort of like new film, new woman, like new love interest thing, which is very, very common in action films. But in particular in this one, who was the new love interest, felt, I was like, really? Really? That just seems all kinds of I'm not sure about that. So that being said, that's not the most important thing in this story, which in some ways I feel like, then maybe just don't have it at all, but it's definitely left some threads for possibilities for future and created the most tension, which, I mean, a lot of films choose the choice that's going to create the most tensions. I do think that some of the characters in this one were absolutely cutthroat, and that was tough for me in terms of the violence. So anyway, I'm not the biggest, it's funny that I ended up picking the vehicle work category for the first time, for the first film that I watched for this, but I will say one of the reasons why I picked this is because the films are a bit shorter. I think one was an hour and a half and one was an hour and 40 minutes. Oddly, I don't just like episodes of TV. For some reason, I could work in 2 films, but I couldn't work in a 3-hour film. Like, why? Why does that, the math says one thing and our behavior says another thing. Like, it's easier to watch 3 episodes of a 40-minute show than a 2-hour show. It makes no sense. They're literally the same time. Anyway, who knows? That's a psychological thing and a habits thing, I think, more than a math thing. Anyway, so even though it's not necessarily my favorite category and the one that I would go to in terms of picking the films that are nominated for vehicle work, I'm glad that I picked this. I thought it was interesting and engaging. I didn't know the story at all. I felt for the characters. There was lots of action. There was both fighting and car stunts. There was a lot of chases and stuff in the second film. That was very, very prominent in the second film. It's so much so that I felt like it kind of overrode the plot a little bit. So the first one had more plot and characters and a lot more of that energy, and this one had a lot more car chases and stuff like that. So, but overall, I'm glad that I gave it a chance. I was happy that I was able to watch 2 films from one series in one day, something I never even thought I would do. It came up in my reflection video. I was like, why didn't I never think to try that? Well, here we are with a series that I didn't know anything about. So that was good to know that's possible, and also, of course, having a shorter running time did help in that instance. So that was my Tourist Stunt Award. So I got 1 Fight the FOMO in, I got 1 Tourist Stunt Award nominee or winner in, and my third category is music films. And I was really surprised. So I started, as I do with my new seasons, I start with creating a list, and usually I do it on paper, but this time I did it in Excel, I think because I wanted to predetermine some things and be able to sort. And the Tourist Stunt Awards, I was working from, anyway, so I was making a list, and I was looking at all of these films and biopics and documentaries and films with musicians or singers at the forefront or rappers at the forefront. And then I was looking and I was including the running times, and I'm like, 2 hours and 12 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 40 minutes. I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, I couldn't dive into, even though there were some films I really want to see and I will work in. I'm like, I need something shorter. So I ended up going with a very unusual choice, I think, which is I watched Svengali from 1931. This is with John Barrymore as Svengali and Marion Walsh as Trilby. And it's based on the book called Trilby. And I was very surprised that her name is, because this, you don't even know what the name of the film is. And even this one of the older posters, it's probably a DVD cover. And it's got a lot of stuff on there. I feel like this one gives a better impression of what she looks like. I don't think she really looked, that was her hair, but that was not her hair. At least, well, she had different haircuts throughout the film. Anyway, so this is about the story, so this is based on a book, and the story we're following here, the protagonist, Svengali, is, how do they describe him? They describe him as a maestro. So he's someone who teaches music. He is a musician, and so there is a music element to it. But he also can hypnotize people. And in this instance, he we see him hypnotizing, in particular, women so that he can gain financial means, basically, and potentially love as well, or love as a side product, or, those can be sort of like one might be the dominant to the other in terms of whether love or money is more important. So yeah, so that's the theme or the plot. So yeah, so it's a bit, it's a bit shady. It's a bit shady. But it is also like from 1931. And this one, I will say, I did watch it because it was short. I think it was an hour and 20 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes. And I'm actually surprised that this is as early as it is at 1931. I thought it felt much like a bit later in terms of like how polished it was. I admit earlier cinema is not my forte, but I thought it would be mid to later 30s. And this one's tough because, like, in some way, the atmosphere is great, and it's very gothic in terms of this sort of dark, romantic kind of idea. But without question, it's creepy, right? In terms of, like, it's clear that he's luring women in, and then he only wants them for one or two things, and that they are not terribly important to him, or are they? So there is this that is the central sort of like, not theme per se, or maybe it is, but so it just like, that's just creepy. And and there's no getting around that, because that's really what the plot is, and that's what the focus is. But I love the atmosphere. It definitely is a check mark for music film, because art, not only is music a theme, art is a theme. So I love when art is a theme, because Trilby is initially a model, and that's how she runs into Svengali, and then he hears her sing and is, he's almost mesmerized by her, and then hypnotizes her to sort of, use her. So that's not great. But there is a fair amount of music throughout the film, and there are scenes with singing, with they say opera singing. I don't know if I'm not an opera aficionado, but that's what the subtitle said. And so that's part of the film throughout the film. So I thought, and it was great. The music and the singing and the art direction, all of that was really, really great. But on the downside, the plot is really creepy. Like, he's really manipulating women for money and love, so that's just creepy. And he does manipulate other people as well. And then also looking up the film and stuff like that, and the sort of the idea of the character, I did find out that unfortunately that the term or the character name of Svengali has come to mean, is considered a negative stereotype. And as I read more about it, I was like, oh, that's not great. And I didn't realize that. And from watching it, like, they definitely, the other guys, the guys in the film, they talked down about him, but I felt like it was mostly surrounding that he had limited means, because for most of the film he does. And so, but then it seems like it's taken a step further in terms of a particular stereotyping. So that's not great. I didn't know this was a book going into it. And I'm surprised, as I mentioned, I'm surprised that this is such an early film. It was actually nominated for 2 Oscars. It was nominated for cinematography and for art direction. And that was cool to see. And I'm a little surprised I didn't know that. I guess usually when I followed Oscars, I guess I haven't followed cinematography and art direction. I thought I did. I thought one year I did cinematography. I mean, there's so many movies, so it's on a spreadsheet somewhere from some year that I did something, and I don't remember all of them. But I did enjoy how it looked, and the mood and the music and all of that stuff I thought was just really great. And so it was a bit of a tougher one in the themes and some of the things that I learned afterwards, but overall, I'm glad I took a chance on it. I watched it on Canopy, and it was a really interesting watch. So, and excuse me. And so overall, it ended up being quite an interesting week. I do feel like there was a bit mixed results. I felt like there wasn't sort of like Usually there's like one film that's a really big standout, and although I think for me Svengali and the first Lost Bullet sort of are the ones that I enjoyed the most, but both of them had some challenges to them. I totally thought Under Paris was going to completely win me over, and it ended up landing a little under, but I still enjoyed it, and I'm still glad that I watched it, and I'm glad that I watched it right away. Yeah, so I don't know. So it was a bit of a weirder week. I don't know, and I don't know if that says something for the categories I picked or just the titles I picked. I don't know. I do feel like it did suffer a little bit from the fact of so many of the films that I picked are long in terms of the categories, like the list that I came up with. So many are long titles, especially the action films. I wouldn't have thought that both action movies and music movies would consistently have works that are over like 2 hours, like 2 hours, 20 minutes. One of the music films, no, one of the action films is almost, there's two that are near or over 3 hours. And I'm like, what? So I might need to do some strategizing of short versus long, and a lot of the Fight the FOMOs might end up being short films. And it is with a question, something that's come up time and time again is the length of film and trying to fit so many films in. And but I'm working on it, so that might mean for other weeks I'll pick a short, like a music documentary, and then a longer action film, and then a short action film, and a longer biopic or something. So for this week, I just wanted to get as much in as possible, and I managed to get the 2 Lost Bullet films. But I felt like 4 films in one day was a bit much. I wouldn't choose that. I think 3 is a lot better for me, because I did feel like I had to put some other things I wanted to do that day to the side to get all of the movies in. And so that wasn't great, but I did manage it. It is possible with planning. Planning always helps. I'm a big planner. I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone. So anyway, that is my results of the first week of watching music films, Torsten Award nominations and winners, and more Fight the FOMO. And I'm really happy with my new categories, even though I did feel like this week was a bit under. But, there's always next week, and I'm always curious to see what I'm going to pick next. I don't know what I'm going to do once the Olympics start, because I love the Olympics, and they're usually on for 2 to 3 weekends. And, but I think the time difference is quite dramatic. I think most of the stuff might be overnight or early in the day. So I don't know how that's going to fare, if I'm just going to have a very different schedule during that time, or what I'm gonna try and do. I don't have to worry about that next week. It's the week after that it comes up, I think. So we're getting close. It's like the 26th or so. I love the Olympics. Do you love the Olympics? I feel like I should have picked sport films or something, but no, I'm sticking with these categories. I guess fighting, the action films that have fighting, that is very, very, very physical. And again, Lost Bullet, that fight scene, I mean, I have not seen anything like it. I will say that, and I watch a lot of action movies, so that was quite the highlight. So, and the atmosphere for Svengali, those are the 2 big highlights of the week. So anyway, that's how my week went. Let me know what you have been watching recently. Let me know if you're interested in watching the Olympics when they drop or when they start. I'm looking forward to more films and, Olympics when it starts. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with another video soon.